And welcome to the Conscious Experience, the channel where we bring you actionable insights, transformational ideas to help you navigate your everyday moments. My name is Boris Kerjner, and today I'm with my brother Mike. Mike, how are you?
I feel alive, opposite of today's topic.
Awesome. Today we are going to be talking about death. Death is such a big topic. It is prevalent, of course, as taboo in our greater culture, in the Western culture. It's prevalent in the spiritual work as the death of the ego and something that is actually embraced, that aspects of ourselves die and we become more whole. And so it's a very rich topic that has both this promise of like expansion and opening and liberation, and at the same time, this terror, this sense of separation, this last goodbye, this loss.
Mhm. Death is a topic I actually talk about with literally everybody, from like strangers and stuff like that to like it's a, and I wonder how many people actually bring up the topic of death. I know I talk about it a lot, but why don't we get started with the main question? So, Boris, what is death? Do you think death is like the loss of your physical body? Do you think it's the loss of your mind? Do you think it's the
Mm.
loss of your five senses? What do you think death is?
I think the death that we are used to here, like I see, like in your background, is this kind of like Grim Reaper experience, and it's like this sense that our life is being taken away, and primarily, of course, here in this dream, we identify life as the movement and activity of the body, right? Breath, right? They say, oh, you breathe your last breath. So I think death is really the death in many ways of not just the physical body, but the death of communication, the death of connection and contact. Because here we're so used to like being able to communicate just through our bodies. Whenever we think of anybody in our lives, if I think about you, I think about my wife, I think about my dad, these all appear as bodies, right? But of course, we know that ultimately they're not, right? That's not the essence or even the truth or even the greater part of who we are. But I think from our perspective from within this game, it is this inevitable cutting of connection, communication, at the very least, some kind of connection, because we can also open to this realm where people talk to people who have passed over through psychics, through mediums, through like Ouija boards or things like this, right? And they have some sense that, yeah, I have some connection. And sometimes, and I can't even say, because my mom passed away when I was 18. It was a really, really stark experience for me. And I really feel and have felt throughout the years of experiences of communication, whether it's like, especially in the beginning, this like as if I hear her through a song or through a movie, having these senses of like, and then people showing up with this mothering energy, with this deep care and concern. I could feel her, but I think ultimately, it's this irreplaceable sense of like, wow, I can't really commune with you in the way that I know, in the way that I was born and raised to be able to do.
Mhm. Do you know any atheists in your life that are
Atheists.
close to you?
Um, I would sometimes, I mean, the first person close to me that, that would come would probably be my uncle. Um, but I can't even say that anybody is really pure atheist at this point. Like,
Okay.
if we talk about it, it's almost like, the atheists that I've really known as atheists have really become more like Sam Harris in the sense of like, oh, yeah, like, this whole idea of consciousness and everything, except they just don't use God, but they'll talk about everything like this.
The
Why do you ask?
the reason I ask is because do you know anybody that would disagree with Einstein's quote, which is energy cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be changed from one form to another?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Which
very
is
few
based on
people would
science, but
disagree. Yeah, I
very
think
few
it's
people would disagree, right?
yeah. And this is really cool, right? Because in contrast to that, there is such a death culture that it's such a loss based culture, right? In our minds, in our vocabulary, in the movies, the media, it's all about preventing death, preventing loss. And when we strive so hard to prevent death and loss, it's pretty obvious we don't have this sense that there is a continuation. We have the sense of like, yeah, that is okay. It's removed over there as a theory, But the real thing is like, no, I will fight to death for my life.
Mhm. It's funny because as humans, we have this trait that I don't know if animals have this or other species have this, but we are aware of our own mortality, right? It's like the
Mm,
second that we're born, we're like essentially racing towards a predetermined destiny of death. It's
yeah.
like, yeah. So, um, interesting. Why do you think people fear death? I know we talked about like culture and society, religion.
Yeah. I think that the probably the core, when I feel into this subject, I would say that the core of it is the sense of being alone, being like lonely forever, having no more contact with your family, with your friends. You see, like so much of our identity is so deeply ingrained in our body, of course, but also when you think about who are you, if people ask at parties like, hey, tell me about yourself, we start telling them about our home, our family, our you know favorite items, our favorite animals, and like whatever it is. It's just like we are so much identified with this life as it is, you know and when we pass away, it's like suddenly everything familiar is gone, and we do also, I think it's important to point out that we have these micro moments. This is actually happening all the time. It's happening all the time that like each, they're okay on a grand scale. There's phases of life. I was a toddler, then I had to go to some kind of kindergarten school, then I had to, all of these are chapters, complete lives that are then closed, and now I'm on a different one. But even more so, even more radically, like this moment, it continues to dissolve. It continues, like anything that I've had in this previous moment, whatever thought, whatever feeling, now it's gone. And so even though there is this ongoing death and rebirth, it's almost like, again, it's almost as if with the breath, right? Alive, gone, alive, gone. And yet I think, beyond all of this is just like we long for love, we long for connection, and in our limited perception we see it only through the body. And so this, I think the deepest fear is just to be alone, and not no one who loves you. Basically, love is going to leave you. This kind of fear, right? Like all these little things and trinkets and people and all this that represents love and familiarity and safety is going to be stripped away. And so, and without choice. Typically, this is maybe another really core space of it, because like if you can kind of give it up, okay, but if it's like taken from you and you're not wanting to let it go, you don't want to, you know then I can really see it as this like stealing kind of loss of love and everything all at once. Yeah.
I love that you bring up the fact that, yeah, most people are probably just scared of being alone. And it's funny because if we go back to that Einstein quote, which is like, nothing can be destroyed, energy has to continue. So you would say that most people believe in that. And so would I. I would say nobody would really disagree with that. So if it's true that we believe in an afterlife, that nothing again can be, um, I'd say probably most people believe in an afterlife, right? Nowadays, with it's hard to find somebody that does. It's rare to find somebody that doesn't, and we can talk about that later, like
Yeah.
the nihilist perspectives. But if you do believe in an afterlife, then you have to believe in something that came before too. So essentially, you have been dead for 13.7 to 13.8 billion years, the lifespan of the universe, right? Apparently. So it's true
Mm.
that if we go somewhere, then we must have come from somewhere. And in that space, it's funny that we still fear death because, oh, here we are. We're still here, like we're still conscious and alive. So there must be something that continues. And I think it's really with like religion and the birth of religion that people have started to fear death, because death, like you mentioned in a couple episodes, was celebrated before. It's like I'll go to the far extreme of like you had mentioned the Mexican cultures, which really use death as an ally. But the extreme of that is like, I remember when I went to Mexico, They used to play a game. It was kind of like Quidditch, but it's kind of like basketball or Quidditch, but the net was very small. It was like this, and it was really high up, and the ball was really small, and you had to use like your elbows and your shoulders or your knees to basically hit the ball into the hole.
Mm.
And they would play this game because it was so difficult. They would play this game sometimes for days. But basically, the first team to score, um, the captain of the winning team would sacrifice himself by cutting off his head, and the team would hold his head in celebration of their win. So it's like there was cultures in the past that knew something about death that really made it like a friend or an ally. You know what I mean? Obviously, that's an extreme example, but
Yeah, it's it's incredible. Like I think we think about cultures throughout the past and how death was seen. Like I've never been much of a historian to really say, okay, well, how did this culture, that culture treat death? But in the passing, like one culture, of course, that stands out is the Egyptian culture that really viewed death. I imagine it's almost similar to how I view it is as a portal, as an initiation, as a moment of transition, right? And there was all kinds of ritual around this. I don't know what it was like for what is called like the common people, common class, versus the pharaohs and the royalty and all of this, but there seems to have been like a really like death was a very integral part of a person's life. And if we really think about also that famous book, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, right? I've never actually had a chance to read it cover to cover, but this book, in essence, um, is a map of how to die, really, not how to die like stoically. I know Seneca, I think, also has a book on how to die, which is like probably, again, I haven't read that one, but I think when I think about Seneca, it's like about honor and it's about like integrity and how to set yourself for it. But the Tibetan Book of the Dead is very interesting because it even
give me one
has
second, Boris.
roles for.
Sorry, we cut out for a second. Let's continue to talk about the Tibetan Book of Dying. So this is a book that I haven't read cover to cover either, but I understand a little bit what it's about. So
Yeah, I was just saying that in that culture, as just a representation of the cultural differences of how death is viewed in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, um, which is, by the way, like a Western name for it. It's not actually the name that they have for it. But there's even roles for like who's there with the person dying, not even the preparation for the person, with the mindset, with the meditation. It's like we're literally that in the culture, it's like you prepare for this grand moment of graduation, which in my heart this feels just so right. And it's like it not only gives you guidance as the traveler, but also your family and the people who are with you. How can they support you? Like what they do with their vibration, with their frequency, with their chant, with their prayer, with their own mind, intention, how they hold you. All of this gives me this sense that like we in the West, something has happened. I almost want to say something's gone wrong, but it's not necessarily that's gone wrong. But here it went all taboo, all bad, all let's try and get rid of death. Almost like the Buddha's, father was like trying to get rid of death so that the Buddha doesn't see any death or suffering.
yeah, the
Um,
Tibetan Book of Dying, I believe, is the process is like 40 days, and that coincides with the pineal gland releasing DMT too, which is very interesting.
mm,
In the Tibetan Book of Dying, they also talk about the main focus is on this term known as the bardos, which is what you had mentioned earlier. It's like uh, the continuation of different moments in time. So each bardos is just a period of time, and so they talk about that as well. And they also mentioned that yeah, it's not like, and this is a Buddhist belief. Obviously, the Tibetan Book of Dying is based on Buddhism. Uh, they talk about what continues on is not like your mental thought process, it's not like your emotions, it's really the samskaras, which we talk a lot here about in the channel. So it's like these deep rooted beliefs or impressions that you leave on yourself. So the goal is again to prepare yourself to burn all your samskaras before you're about to die so that you can
yeah.
have a better life. And again, this is just one religious belief about the purpose of or life after death. Really, nobody knows. I'm curious, maybe we can get into this now. What are your thoughts about life after death? I know we've both had quite a few psychedelic experiences, which is probably the closest you can get to death without actually physically dying, right? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I really feel that that the essence of what we are, it always continues, just like it continues. You see, like there's some propensities, which is what we refer to as samskaras. Like here in the waking dream, there's also the same propensities in our nightly dream, but there is also this awareness. There's also this essential self. In the dream, I could be a tiger, or I could be in a different time, or I could be in a different constellation of family and relationships altogether, but I am still myself. Like I still retain my sense of like, yeah, I know me, and it's the same me that wakes up in the morning. But here, I'm like, oh yeah, so that was a dream. So I really think that the experience of dying is something very similar to the experience of waking up from a dream. I really get the sense of, when I hear about people's near-death experiences, and I can only really compare it through sports. I've had some moments in sports, not that I was about to die, but these moments where it's just like it's an intensity. So I used to play hockey, and just for some reason, like everything starts to go slow motion. Really intense moment, something you're about to react, and then boom, and suddenly it starts to go very slow motion. And as a goalie, I would just watch the puck very slowly enter my glove. I'm like, oh yeah, I got it. So I really feel that what happens, and I also look at it, when you see animals being captured by other animals, like a gazelle, right, being captured by a lion, there it is. And now it's caught, and it just like surrenders. And I really get the sense that we never really experience our death. Like we never ever actually die. Oh, the only thing that's going to happen is like, oh, and this fading away, and you're kind of like you're waking up into a different space. And the reason that I say this is just because like it's kind of like that principle, as above so below, as within so without. It's just this kind of sense where we can look at our present experience and and sort of like feel into the texture and say, okay, so there's that commonality, that there's that kind of space. So I really, my sense is that this is what happens. Like we wake up, and yeah, the dream may remain a dream, and we may still remember aspects of our whatever was there as this life, but I think we essentially wake up in a sense of, yeah, being free from the emotions, from the thought processes, from the, just like we do when we wake up after a nightly dream.
That was a reference for all you nerds out there. Nerd, no one ever really dies. I love that term. um, yeah, I can just, based on my one experience, this was actually with you when we went camping. We did 10 grams of, or like 8 or 10 grams of mushrooms or something, a very heroic dose. And in that, I really got a sense of the closest to what death was for me, which is something I actually believed all along, which is that yes, I was still there and present, but my five senses were completely gone. And I think what we have here on earth is really just five senses, unless we're in the dream realm, right? So it was almost like the five senses were gone. And I've always said this was like way back, like many, many years ago. I remember sitting with Sunny in a car discussing this. Sunny's our mutual friend. And we were talking about like what happens after death. And we thought that it was way too limited to believe like the Buddhist reincarnation, like what most people think of the Buddhist reincarnation, which is that you come back here, you could be a lower being, a higher being, but you have essentially these five senses. I had to limit infinity and God to just five senses is ridiculous. So I look at death as something like, it's kind of like going to the airport, right? It's like we love going to the airport and we love flying to a new destination. We're essentially leaving our home, leaving what we know, which can be scary, but we're going to a new destination. And this new destination, in my opinion, has an opening of way more than five senses. Like, could you imagine if our next consciousness state was opened up to 1,000 senses, like why not? Like, could you imagine? You can't even imagine a world that doesn't have these five senses, that has 1,000 new senses, you know? So I think it's something that we should definitely be looking forward to. And this is probably the reason that they were celebrating by chopping off the winner's head. It's like they knew something that we did not.
Yeah. I also think that an interesting angle to explore is like how death is handled in today's world, right? Like what we do with this process, right? And if we look at Western culture, we basically see in my heart, it is like I feel pain in my heart from this, beholding this. And it's basically like instead of any kind of honoring of death, instead of any kind of even exploration, philosophical, otherwise, it is literally like um this idea of life extension. And the way that it's played out right now is that people who are sick, people who would have died long time ago, are being artificially kept alive in states of severe limitation, severe suffering, not only their own suffering, the suffering of everyone watching them, all their family. And it's like it continues on, continues on. How much further can we push it? How much further can we push it? And the thing is like I feel, and I'm not sure if this is true, but I wonder if this distortion was created through the um through like a capitalistic interest in money, in finances, in like basically when somebody's dying, through insurance, through everything, the way that it's set up, and the person's own livelihood, you literally have the ability to siphon almost everything that this person has if you are their caretaker.
Mhm.
So you sell them every possible drug in the hope, okay, hope is gone. Let me now sell you every possible drug to like minimize your pain, to make you go oblivious, to just like numb you out, to comfort your life as long as we can keep you alive. Let
Mhm.
me now hook you up to an expensive like ventilator. We're just gonna be here and you're now unconscious. Okay, we're gonna keep pumping you with like IV drips and air. And it's like, to me, it's I feel that heartbreak because it's like we take the person from a state where it is possible to have perhaps a conscious transition. It is possible to make this moment, this last moment, a lovely, like connected family. If not family, then like just like compassionate care. And we turn it into like something pretty grotesque. It almost reminds me of like the Buddhist meditations of like, oh, you are, you're attracted. I don't know if you know this one, right? It's like, oh, you have an attachment to some person. It's like, oh, maybe this beautiful woman. Oh, now okay, let's do this meditation. Let's just start taking off her skin. Okay, all the skin is gone. Now it's just
Blood, piss,
flesh.
and guts.
Yeah, so exactly, and pus.
Yeah,
Actually,
pus.
they say. So it's like that's what I think we do in a very literal way here, at least in the West. I don't know what cultures like still remain that really honor death and have some kind of consciousness about it. But I feel like here, I just, I know it's a stage of evolution, but I just feel it gets so perverted and it like just breaks my heart.
I agree with you, but since I'm bipolar, I'm going to argue that later. So that touches in on the question I had, which is there a divine purpose of death, which we'll talk about in a second. I just want to mention before that though, because you had mentioned something about the gazelles and their experience, like when you said nobody really experiences death. I have a strong belief, and again, I'm probably 100% wrong. Nothing we say on this podcast is truth. That in the moment of death, they've actually studied this science. They were able to see that 30 seconds after somebody dies, after their heart stops, the brain actually goes through immense activity, and it's correlated to the dream states, what fires. And they call this life recall. So you know the term "my life flashed before my eyes." Well, they can actually see like there is a form of life recall. And I've always said this through poetry. It's like at the end of your life, you're going to have a life recall, even if it's 30 seconds. It might feel like it's longer, and there's people that said they have died that it felt like eternity with this life recall. So it's not really 30 seconds in real time. If you want to talk about time, check out our time podcast where we talk about if time is real or not. um but you're gonna cry. I think you're gonna, maybe you're not gonna cry physically because you're already dead, but your soul is gonna weep, not because it's sad, but because it's gonna recognize the beauty of what you have lived through your entire life. I have a strong feeling that that is what happens. Okay, let's get into, or do you want to say something
I
before we
want to
move
say a
on?
little bit about
Yeah.
this. I remember I shared, I think, in one of the episodes about that year when my mom passed away. When I was 18, she was 38. So it was a young experience, and no one was prepared for this. And none of this consciousness, anything that we're describing now, that was not present at all. It was pure muggle dumb. and and I just want to say that, like, in that experience that I shared before, the that revelation after, the experience that I had also with psilocybin, etc. It's like what happened in me is that I got to see that what you're talking about, like in me, like of course it's not myself who died, but it was mom who passed away. But in that mystical experience, the revelation, the freedom that I was given really came just through this experience of watching how, for some reason, it was just this evolution of life on earth, not even my own personal life. That was part of it later, but just watching how everything that, like all the turmoil, how it perfectly fits in together, how it was just this magnificent, beautiful tapestry, beautiful, everything, every war, every famine, every it was just all together in this, like, wow. And then my little life, and then mom, and it was just like, holy, and it is beatific. And so I really feel that it is very true that life ends in love, in life, our bodily life. I think that this is this is that kind of like cosmic joke at the end. Here we are, we're like, what if something's wrong? What if something's wrong? Did I do enough? Am I gonna go? Am I okay? And then boom, you just see, like, no matter what you did, it was just this, like, perfection.
Yeah, which is like the opposite of the fear kind of death in traditional like religions, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like the scale, you were going to choose a background where at the, you didn't choose it for this one, but it's like the scale of whether you were a good boy or a bad boy, and it's like you go to
Yeah.
heaven or hell. That's a very fear bearing death. So let's move on to, what do you think is the divine purpose of death? And obviously we can move to the polarizing viewpoints of like, it gives meaning to life, it allows you to appreciate life, all that stuff. Or the more like, oh my god, if we're all gonna die, then you take a nihilistic point of view. It's like, not only am I gonna die, but eventually, like, some people go as far as like, oh, the sun is eventually gonna collapse, so what's the point of this all? Like, well, what is the point of life?
Yeah. Really good. I kind of want to take an angle at this, like, what's the point of basketball? You know? Like, what's the point? Like, we were all eventually going to walk off the court. Nobody's going to be here anymore. Nobody, eventually, we're going to forget about this. We might even stop playing basketball eventually, and then we're going to die. So, what was the point?
Yeah.
And the point is what it is, like, many times I think the way that we have been conditioned is we keep on trying to see a point that is outside of the actual experience. It's like, so here I have this experience, this right now. What's the point? And we always go to the future. We're like, yeah, well, it will, or we go to the past. Oh, it has, and then we validate this based on time. And that's okay. Like, I get why we do that. But at the same time, it's like, like this flower, like, what's the point? And its point is happening right now. Its point is literally unfolding in this moment. And it is that which we're talking about. It's just like we behold it and we're like, ah. So it's like, I think the point of life is that we live, right? The point of life is this, like, moment by moment sculpture, and it's expressing its meaning now. But then death really gives an amazing contrast to this, because think about basketball again, and, like, if basketball never ended, right? It's just like we're freaking on the court. We're just like, it just keeps going, and, like, there's just no end to this game. The score is like 9,999,000. Um, it's like, and it's the same thing with a book, right? Like we read the book
Mm.
and we know the book is coming to an end. If we were reading a book and this book never, we like this book never ends. It just keeps. There's probably going to be something like that in the future. It's like AI writing the book, and you're just like freaking reading, reading. It just never ends. Or the same thing with movies. It's like the the beauty of everything is just like in contrast to the fact of like nothing. It gives it this I think luminosity, this like in Yiddish is called Geschmack. It's the juice of life. It's like this, yeah, meaning not as an intellectual meaning, but meaning as like this is so precious. Like this is this momentary snowflake. It's just here like this, and now it's already going away.
Mm.
And I think that just sparks our heart and reveals to us like love and connection. And I really feel that, so many times people say, um, you don't know what you have until it's gone, right? And it's this thing. It's like this contrast that I think is built into this game, that just gives us this sense of like deep appreciation of everything. Yeah.
Yeah, we are, as humans, we are meaning making machines, right? So it's interesting. We can actually cover that on a future episode. I know you wanted to talk in a future episode about the purpose of life, or like what a lot of like Buddhists say, like, what is your dharma? What is your purpose here? Like, what kind of meaning have you given life? Which will be a very interesting episode. I know I had to
Yeah.
contemplate that a long time ago when I became a yoga teacher. That was our main homework actually for the 6 months. It was like you have to say what is your sat dharma, which is your truest meaning here on earth. And yeah, we'll talk about that. But it's essentially what you're saying. It's like it's here. It's this moment. It's like live this moment and squeeze as much as you can out of life, because it's eventually we're destined to die.
Yeah, I want to just check this out. Like this moment without awareness of death is like, okay, yeah, great, cool. I'm here with you, and it's really awesome. But if I know that when we click end on this, it's the end of life, it's the end of my life. Like it is completely different what I'm doing here. The meaning, and the meaning again, I really want to highlight. It's not necessarily something I can put into words. It's just the sense of meaningfulness, like and preciousness, and this sense of like, wow, like huh, this is it. This is my last moment. Amazing, and I get to spend it with you. And there's an awareness that lights up. There's an openness, there's a willingness, there's a all of these things that many times we're like, oh, how do I develop willingness? Let me look it up. How do I develop motivation? It's like, no. It's like if you're aware of this, it's like it is naturally and intrinsically right here. It's bursting, it is like oozing, right in this moment.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Let's not hit end on this podcast. This is the podcast that never ends, guys. So some other thoughts on like, yeah, what is the divine purpose on death that I had while contemplating was uh, kind of like one is that life doesn't really care about the individual, right? It cares about society. So the fact that you die is not really conscious, like the movement of the universe and consciousness doesn't really care about you as an individual. It cares about optimizing and evolving society, right? So one idea could be, this might be a step back, more surface level, is that you die so that future generations can be more evolved from you. That's we can go into depth on that, or we don't need to. Another one is contrary to what you said earlier. So this is something that I had that I thought was interesting. I'll just throw it out there. Is like, yes, people try to prolong life, and it actually, like you were saying in the hospital, it's like, yeah, hook this up and inject them with this and keep their heart going with this. That causes like a lot of fear and anxiety. Like I doubt the families like seeing that. It's not like they're like, yeah, they're gonna live. It's like, oh shit, like what are we doing?
Yeah.
Probably, right? But I had also thought, like, if there is a divine purpose, we as humans have sought immortality since the beginning of time. We've looked for the golden elixir to immortality, right? Why do we seek this? I'm not sure, because if you ask most people, it's like, if you could snap your finger and you could live forever, would you do it? Most people would probably say no, for the reasons that we talked about. If there's no death, there's no like meaning to life. Yet we seek this immortality. And when I was doing my research, it's funny because scientists are actually researching one form of a jellyfish. This is like the only thing that is actually immortal. So this jellyfish can actually, as it ages, it can actually reverse age and go back to when it was just a blob again. It can do this infinite times.
Wow.
Obviously, as a jellyfish, it gets eaten or whatever. But again, we're looking for the key to immortality. So what if the divine purpose of death is for us humans to seek immortality? So through technology, because technology is obviously created by the divine, it's propagating, it's like unified consciousness. So the fact that we're using technology to prolong life, when we think about like 100 years ago, what the lifespan was, it was like way less than what it is now, I think, right? Or even a couple thousand years ago. So we are prolonging life through technology, and eventually maybe one day we will become immortal like gods. How that will look, I'm not too sure, but what are your thoughts on that? That the point is that we do recognize our immortality
Yeah,
or work towards it.
the search for immortality. I just want to contrast something, and I don't know, of course, I have no idea what's true, because I really define my sense of knowing as my experience, right? But when we say like lifespan has been extended, like some of what really caught my attention in the past, first of all, if we look at the Bible, which is only like 2 3 thousand, let's say 5,000 years ago, the Old Testament, people were apparently living hundreds of years. There's people who say like this, like this person's 800 something years, and then this
True.
lived for 700 something years. And it's like, did we really progress, or has there been some kind of a reset where it's just like now we are this kind of like
Junk food,
version?
processed food.
Yeah. And now we're extending, like if we really think about this is just complete insanity. If we really think about it, like we're creating a world that is actively deleting our aliveness through just like contaminated air, through cutting down the rainforests, through polluting the oceans, through throwing like lead and heavy metals into the air, and they end up everywhere. Like we're actively doing this everywhere, and yet there's then this other stream of like, well, now you have asthma, now you have this, this is actually also crazy. It's like how many people now are dying versus earlier, like even a few years ago. There's more thousands of people dying each month now. And we're saying, oh, we're progressing towards life extension. We have all of these cool. So sometimes I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's true about that.
Mhm.
But the core question is not really about this. It's about like our search for immortality. And I think it's misplaced. I think it's misguided. And here's why. It's like, there's sometimes, I'm sure you experience it too, Mike. It's like, you wish you had more hours in the day, right? It's like, hey, this is it's a great day. I'm doing these things. It's like my wife and I just had an amazing weekend, and she was so sad at the end of it. She's like, oh, it's ending. We're going into Monday. And you have this sense, oh, I wish I could have more hours, but it's like, but do I want the day to go on forever? Like, do I want the one day to really never end? There's not tomorrow. There's just this like, I'm not sure that I do. I would like a reset. I would like to experience tomorrow. I would like to integrate the experience of my life and start again, wiser, refreshed, etc. Not this space of like, oh, I know everything about this day. I've been in this day for thousands of years now. It's like that part is like, yeah, that's kind of like Groundhog's Day. Huh? So so I really feel that it's misguided in the sense that we do want bookends. We do. It's like this. What if this lifetime was just a day in your greater life? How here we wake up in the morning, we go to sleep at night, that's a day. I think it's the same thing. Like, we are born into this dream, this is a day, and then we are going towards the evening and sunset, and then it's over and we go to a new day. I'm like, why want I want to go to a new day? Why would I want to like grasp onto this one and say, no, I will not leave this day?
Yeah, that's amazing. I agree with that. It's like going to the airport, right? It's like, let's end
Yeah.
the day and go to a new day. It's touchy, and this will be the last thing I say about this, but it's like, yes, if I said, Boris, you could snap your finger, not only you, but everybody that you love, your friends, your family, would also live forever. You would contemplate it, and I bet you your answer would be no, because it's infinite. But if I said, Boris, I can extend your life and your health another 100 years, you might say yes. Now, how far would you take that, right? It's like, yeah, after 1,000 years, would I get bored? After 100,000? I think everybody is different, like some people reach the end of their life and like, I've lived a good life, I'm ready to go. But a
Yeah.
lot of people would be like, yeah, if you could restore my health, shorten our telomeres, which is coming in the next 5 years, according to Tony Robbins, the reverse aging, would you want to live another 100 years? Right now, if you ask me, I would say yes. I would say yes. I have more time to do my businesses, to help humanity, to become a billionaire, like all these things. I bet you most people would say yes. So
Yeah.
it's just a
I
fine
wonder,
fine line.
I wonder though, like, I think that the a big part of the yes in these questions, and you're saying that another one I might say no, but I might say yes, because the big part of it is the novelty. The big part of it is like, oh, but this is like a new experience. It's like, oh, yeah, if I snap my fingers and I live forever, like, yeah, I can imagine, yeah, maybe there's some downsides to this, but it's like, but this is a new experience. It's like, well, what is that? And there's a big part of me, and I think with the child within everybody's like, yeah, what is that? And then it's like, I check that out.
Yeah, what does the
um
future look like, right? What does 100, 200 years from now look like? Yeah,
yeah.
there is.
And then also, like, health versus death, I think, are really different in
Mhm.
my experience. We have come to this kind of living here where it's like we associate death with sickness,
Yeah.
which is very
The
unfortunate.
Grim Reaper. It gets grim, guys.
Yeah. Like, what we are associating death with being forced out of our body. And this is not a necessity. This is like a conditioning. This is like we keep on seeing it in the movies, in the shows, everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And it's like we think, yeah, 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 it's just like that. But like, I know, uh, for example, I'm not sure if it was Deepak Chopra talking about his dad passing away. There's a political slant on it too, but like, he said that this was like right around the 2000 elections, the year 2000. I think it was like between Al Gore and George Bush, like those elections. And his dad was healthy, old Indian man, and he watched the elections. George Bush won, and then he's like, "That's it, I'm out of here." And and apparently that afternoon, sitting in his like chair, just he went away.
By choice. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I've heard actually also, of like through like Indian guru lore and all of this, but I don't think it's so exclusive. I really believe that our true intrinsic way of transitioning is not through force.
Mhm.
It's through yielding. It's through this sense of like, oh, there's an invitation, and I go. It's like a psychedelic experience. It's like a sleep, or it's like a dream coming on. Um, and I really want to, in my heart, like, there's something, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, Mike, but I feel in my heart that like this calling to transform, to bring a different quality of experience to these last days and months of our lives. And in my vision, I keep on, like, even though that's not my main thing right now, but I keep hearing and feeling these drips of like, to have like an ascension kind of hospice, where people come to ascend, where people come to burn off their samskaras, to be held in tremendous love, to use whatever we need to use, plant medicines, like, music, frequencies, ceremony, to behold this transition, to support it, so that people, I really believe that it's like, it's a very special moment when we're dying. It's like, there's something about it where I do feel like there is an opportunity to not just continue with the habitual pattern, but to actually like transcend, to actually make a leap in consciousness, make a leap to love, make a leap of radical forgiveness, radical surrender, and say, God, not my will, thy will now, thy will now. And have a completely different quality of death than we've ever experienced before. So I feel that there's going to be a time when it's ripe like this, that we see death not as this sad thing, not as this like, oh, deep misfortune and force and like pus and blood and guts and like all of this weird shit that's happening in the hospitals right now. But instead we see it as this like, just like birth. Also, I don't like what they're doing in the hospitals with it, but it's like this celebration, this sense of like, wow, it's like we are celebrating you, and we're celebrating now your graduation. And it's a holy moment and a wholesome moment, and nothing about is taboo or hidden or anything. It's like we are together in this, we hold it together. Yeah, it's on my heart.
That's so beautiful. I would absolutely love to do that with you. One, because I love death, and then two, because I understand that this used to be a tradition, right? Or it still is. It's like in the Indian traditions, Maha Samadhi is what it was called. It's this ability to meditate your soul out of your body. And there was great yogis that have like brought all their students to like, and they would rent an apartment in like New York, and they would sit on like the bed or something like that, and they would just take a meditation posture, and they would just leave, and they would just essentially die and leave their body by choice. Absolutely would love to do that. I hope the world transitions to that. If you guys want to see awakened, what should we call it, awakened hospice, comment down below. I think that would be amazing. I think a lot of people would be interested in that, to be honest.
That's what I long for personally. Like, I want my last moments, to be surrounded in that kind of consciousness, in, people like celebrating, loving, holding that space, holding the vibration, playing singing bowls or oming or whatever they're doing. But we are like in this moment, it's like, okay, I don't know if you've ever had a moment where you're facilitated in a psychedelic journey where it's just like, you're like, okay, I trust that you're going to look, you basically have somebody angeling you. And it's just like that. It's like, ah, yeah, I just would love that.
I had a small moment. It was very brief. It was only one time in my experience. I wasn't on any substance or psychedelic. I was just in strict meditation. And I felt like I reached a stage where it was a thin veil between leaving this body and taking Mahasamadhi, or yeah. And basically, I got too scared. It's like I felt like my soul was leaving my body, but since all I've ever known was my five senses, it instantly came back. But yeah, I definitely believe that's possible. And again, it's the choice of taking your breath or not. Like great yogis breathe very little, right? So I believe that once the breath is gone, once inspiration, once God is gone from your body, you essentially leave. Um, I'll read you one cool quote about the peacefulness of death. Here it's a quote by Oscar Wilde. It says, "Death must be so beautiful, to lie in the soft brown earth, with the grasses waving above one's head, and listen to silence. To have no yesterday and no tomorrow. To forget time, to forget life, to be at peace." Yeah.
Oh, why
That's
wait for death? That
yeah.
sounds perfect right now.
Yeah, totally. And then there's another one. It says, "We all die. The goal isn't to live forever. The goal is to create something that will." But again,
Mm,
that's also very surface level because yeah, you can create something that will last thousands of years, but eventually that will die. So it's like the thing that you're wanting to live forever is, I think, is a peaceful, beautiful experience. It's a soul that just has enjoyed itself here.
yes.
Um, I have one last quote, but I'm going to save it. I'm going to ask you a question first, Boris.
Yeah.
Unless you have anything else, do you want to talk about anything else regarding death that you'd like to share? Its importance or
Yeah, I would just love to welcome death more into our experience, to take the sting out of it, to take the fear out of it. Uh, it's like I'm reminded of times when I was very sick, just having like either like an intense flu or something, and just the immense gratitude of, you know, appreciating health when I had it. And of course, knowing I'm coming back to it, and just feeling like, wow, what a gift, what a gift, what a gift, what a gift. Okay, just breathe. And I feel it's in the same way. I would love to have death be more of something like this that gives us this sense of gratitude, this sense of preciousness, this sense of like, yeah, I'm willing to let it go because I learn from death. I am its apprentice. Like I'm understanding. And I don't mean this in a like any kind of morgue kind of way. I mean this in a very um liberating way of just being able to walk in the world knowing you don't know if the next time your foot comes down you'll feel it or you'll be here or not. It's just like you're just here for this one split instant, and you're fully available. There isn't part of you just trying to like get rid of the past, get rid of or get to some future. And I think that death, you know, yeah, death has this all of this association with something bad, but I think that this is another perversion, you know. It's another perversion of duality. It's like we have good and bad, right? And it's like, yeah, yeah, the good. Don't look at the bad. Don't, it doesn't exist. You know, no, but like there could not be the good without the bad, right? And so it's just that's just it. I that's my invitation. That's my share. I think like this is why this is I think the importance of death. That death can be a tremendous teacher, an ally, a counselor. Um, but again, even just this word death has this connotation. And maybe for some people, God has this connotation of like, oh, some kind of like vengeful, you know, thing that's judging me, you know, but that's not what we mean here at all. So yeah, that.
I'm excited to see our future unfolding and relationships to death, because as you know, all of these deep topics, they change and evolve as we move through life experiences. There's my friend Kate, who visited from the UK. She was never afraid of death, and I think if you don't think about death, it has this like inner calling within you that shows up as forms of like anxiety and like different
Mm.
like ways that like if you don't become friends with it. But
Mm.
I think like for in her example, it was like she was never really afraid of death until she took one plane ride that was a little bit bumpy. And then ever since that plane ride, and I know it sounds like a silly thing, but you can think of like maybe somebody passes, like your parent passes or something like that. It
Yeah.
just shifts your relationship with death. And you might become scared of death again. And you might have to redefine your relationship to become friendly with it again. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves in our lifetime. So I'm excited for that.
Mm.
My last question to you, Boris, is how do you want to die?
Yeah, this is a beautiful question. I think that I touched on that in my vision. Um, I want to die surrounded by love. I want to die consciously. I want to like just fully embrace death. Like I feel excited for it. Not death in the sense of like the end, but in the sense of graduation, in the sense of like well, what else is there? Like, what is life like without this body? I'm excited for it. I'm excited, and I'm, you know, I feel like my life is this preparation really for that moment and to meet it with my heart wide open, to meet it with my mind wide open, to meet it and say, come on in and, you know, dine with me. And I'm ready to meet you. I've been waiting my whole life to meet you.
Mm,
I
beautiful.
would say like this, brother. Yeah. How about you?
That's beautiful. Well, I'm bipolar, so let me. I do wish that. I mean, my whole life and whole preparation, the reason I meditate is to die a peaceful death. But at the same time, let me leave you with a quote, and then I'll tell you how I want to die. So this is a famous quote by Hunter S. Thompson. So it says, "Life should not be a journey to the grave, with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in a broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, 'Wow, what a ride!'"
Yes.
So how do I want to die? Probably by like tsunami or like burning or something, you know, like set me on fire and then kill me by a tsunami.
That reminds me of the Robert Frost poem. It's like, is the world gonna end in fire or in ice?
Ooh.
But yeah, yeah, it's you know, that's another really interesting
One
thing, right?
last
Of like,
experience, you know?
yeah, think about people who pass away en masse, right? That's something, you know, that also sometimes fascinates me. Typically we think about death as like somebody being old age, or unwell, but there's moments, people on a cruise ship, people, I remember that tsunami that hit, in Southeast Asia,
Mm.
you know, in the early 2000s. And it's like I can imagine there's just like there's this wall of water, ocean coming down, and we're just here, and I'm like, okay. And I wonder what that experience is like, how qualitatively different that is, you know, like what happens? Do we actually experience something shared when we die, or when our body passes away, or is it totally still like in the very individual? So yeah, that image that you shared brought that question to me.
Totally. And we will never know. This is an amazing topic. I'm so glad we got to discuss this and share our viewpoints. Hopefully, you guys liked it. If you did, make sure you drop us a like and subscribe. Until next time, take care, guys.
Absolutely.
God bless
Thank
and
you.
stay alive.